Hello, welcome back to another episode of, this is the first episode of this series, which is not actually a series, it's just a video. Anyway, today we're doing some cool stuff, something that I think is really interesting, and a topic that not a ton of people have talked about as far as I can tell, but is probably one of the most important things going forward into Sword and Shield that we need to discuss and be aware of, because yeah, this is like one of the biggest mechanics changes that I'm going to talk about, and one of the things that I think is going to have the biggest impact on Pokemon Sword and Shield's metagame, both in VGC and in singles. I think this is going to be really, really, really big for the game, or just for the way the game is played. So yeah, with all that being said, before we start, I just want to say thank you guys so much for the support. Like, I really want you to know that I don't take it for granted. We've been getting a ton of views and so many comments and likes, and I just really want to say thank you and welcome to all the new subscribers. Like I said, like, my goal is to reach 100,000 subscribers, and for the first time in a while, I feel like it's actually possible. So, yeah, I want you to know that, like, when you like or you comment or if you subscribe, like, I'm not like such a big channel that it's just like, oh yeah, like, we were gonna get that anyway. Like, I really do appreciate it, because I like literally can't reach my goals without y'all's help. So, of course, if you want to like be more willing to like and willing to comment moving forward as we get into Sword and Shield, like, that would be amazing for me. But of course, do whatever you want, right? I mean, you know that. But anyway, let's talk about this. So today we're talking about max moves. We're not talking about G max moves. Max moves are similar to Z moves in a sense. When a Pokemon Dynamaxes, I genuinely thought it was called Gigamax. Apparently it's actually called Dynamax. So when a Pokemon Dynamaxes, all of its moves change into one of these max moves. All of its moves change to a max move. Not every, you know what I'm saying. Like, it will have 4 max moves. Maybe some of them will be the same. Like, you could have 2 max flares, for example. And this is very interesting for a number of reasons. So the biggest thing, of course, is these max moves. Well, I don't actually know which is bigger. The max moves, basically, okay, so there's 2 kind of big aspects of this that I want to talk about. The first is that when you use a max move, any original effect of your move is overwritten and removed. Doesn't sound like a huge deal, right? Doesn't seem like a big deal. However, I think that it might actually be, and we'll talk about that in a second. The second thing is that you have this secondary effect with I believe with the exception of Max Guard. With the exception of Max Guard, you'll have a secondary effect, and a lot of them are really good to the point where it could be worth building a team around. So let's talk about the positives. Let's talk about the additional effects first. I wasn't sure how I wanted to do this. We're going to talk about the additional effects first. So a lot of these effects are really, really, really powerful. Specifically, of course, the things that affect the terms of the battle. So I'm talking about activating weather. We have sun, rain, hail, and I can only assume sand somewhere. That we don't have rock on here, but I am sure that rock will set sand. Oh, never. Oh yeah, here. I'm a genius. And then misty, electric, terrain here, grassy, and then psychic's not on here, but I'm sure that psychic will be psychic terrain. So, so those are the 2. That's one of them, and then the other one is boost the user's speed, raise the user's attack, lowers opponent's speed stat, raises the user's defense. There's also going to be one that so basically it looks like there's kind of 3 categories, 4 categories: set weather, set terrain, raise stats, lower opponent's stats. And so basically these create some really, really powerful, really abusable combos. The easiest one, I guess, to talk about is, let's talk about terrain. So some Pokemon aren't really that. By some Pokemon, sorry, I mean the Tapu. So the Tapu Pokemon aren't inherently really that, like, much better than a lot of other Pokemon. For example, specifically, let's talk about Tapu Lele, because Tapu Lele has relatively bad physical. It's got bad physical defense, low base HP, low base speed, decent base speed, but nothing to write home about. Decent special attack, like 145, I believe, which is actually pretty good. So let's say good special attack. But overall, relatively mediocre stats, and pretty good typing. But it was used so much throughout its lifespan so far because of its ability. It was the only way to set psychic terrain on the field. And so if you had partners that benefited it, for example, Metagross, or Drifblim, right? You were kind of forced into using Tapu Lele. If you wanted to abuse psychic terrain, you couldn't. I'm sure some Pokemon got psychic terrain, but you couldn't, like, you know, like, it, you Like, you weren't going to run manual Psychic Terrain when you could just have Tapu Lele, right? And in 2019, of course, Mewtwo. That's another Pokemon. But now we have other ways of setting terrain. And that's big because it means that offensively, you don't need to use a Pokemon like Tapu Lele to set the terrain, but also defensively, like, there were times where I felt I felt like Tapu Fini you had to use because, or Tapu Bulu, which I loved. They were good because their abilities were they were like defensive in the way that they played, because they could overwrite the more common at the time in like 17, I remember, and always Coco was popular, but you could overwrite that kind of overwhelming offensive presence, because Electric Terrain made Tapu Koko really strong. It's really not that strong without the terrain, and Psychic Terrain made Tapu Lele very strong, but also stopped all priority attacks. And so a lot of these hyper offense teams would just abuse Psychic Terrain stopping priority attacks and just kind of hit you fast and hard, and you couldn't really cope with it. Now, with the addition of max moves and the ability for other Pokemon, so not only will a Pokemon, do you not need to run a Tapu to set terrain, but you can also use it defensively, right? I'm sure on your team you're going to have one of, Grass, Fairy, Electric, or Psychic on some of your attacks, and so any of those Pokemon can overwrite your opponent's terrain, provided it's not you're not using grass max overgrowth against grassy terrain on the field. But you know what I'm saying? Like, you don't even need to specifically tech against it. So that's really big. Terrain, similar with weather. The weather setters in general are a bit better as Pokemon, I think. I mean, obviously Tapu Koko is really good, but it wouldn't be as good without its ability. Same kind of with Politoed, but Pokemon like Tyranitar and Gigalith you could maybe make a case for. But yeah, I mean, a lot of these Pokemon rely on their abilities. And while it doesn't happen too much with Sand, like, I feel like Sand Pokemon don't, at least in recent years, haven't relied too much on like their weather being up to sweep. It's still, like, sometimes, like, if you have Excadrill or you have a Sand Sweeper on your team, oftentimes you're going to want to bring that Pokemon always with your Sand Setter, if you have a Sweeper. And so now, this is good because, number one, it, as an offensive tool, of course, it's the exact same thing as terrain. Similar to how terrains work in that you don't need, like, to bring Tapu Lele if you want to have Psychic Terrain support. If you have a really fast powerful Psychic type, you can now just bring a faster Pokemon with a Psychic type attack. You could do the same thing with Sand. You could run Excadrill if Excadrill is in the format, or, Sandveil Garchomp if that's allowed. And you can set Sandstorm with a partner so that you don't need to bring Garchomp always with Tyranitar. So yeah, there's that. The other big thing that I want to talk about, and the stats are kind of like, the stats give you a lot of capability to sweep. So for example, a Pokemon like Kartana could run Max Airstream with Aerial Ace, for example, and boost its speed and also attack on the same turn. Unlike Z moves that raise stats, because Z moves that raise stats always copied the base move, right? So if you wanted to use Z Tailwind, you could get a speed boost and you could raise your crit rate, but you couldn't do damage in the same turn. Which one raises attack? Kartana could use Sacred Sword, make it max Knuckle, and raise its attack on the same turn. Like, that's pretty big. Hopefully Kartana won't be in the game, but, so yeah, so there's that. And then there's also these max moves that lower the opponent, the target's stats. So that's another example, kind of similar to how I picture, like, an offensive terrain setter. Like, let's say you had like, I'm just gonna use a good Pokemon and a bad Pokemon for an example, but, like, let's say you had, let's say Mega Metagross, let's say this mechanic happened last gen, right? And it was 2018, and you had, like, I don't know, Whimsicott. You had Whimsicott Metagross, and your opponent thought they were safe, but you went for Dynamax Whimsicott, you went for set Psychic Terrain, and now your Metagross is now in Psychic Terrain and goes for Send Headbutt. In a similar fashion, you could use Max Darkness. For example, let's say you have, like, Liepard and, I don't know, like, a strong special attacker, like regular Gengar, and your Gengar was for some reason slower than your Liepard. Your Liepard could go for Dark Pulse, lower the target's special defense, and then also, Gengar could attack quickly. So this opens up a lot of doors for combo attacks. I am honestly kind of worried about it, truth be told. I'm a little worried about, because I don't love hyper offense, and I don't like super aggressive, playstyles and stuff. I don't know, like, it's just not my thing, and so I'm a little worried about combination attacks, because kind of combination cheese could be really scary here. Like, you don't know if your opponent's going to attack on, like, Max Darkness, run, like, a fast Snarl or a fast Dark Pulse, and all of a sudden you're going to get dropped turn 1. So I'm a little apprehensive about this. A Pokemon like Hydreigon is a perfect example to take advantage of this. It's, like, in a good speed tier where it's not too fast, but against slower Pokemon, you could lower a special defense stat and then drop a Draco. Shoutouts to Joey. and just nuke something. So it's really scary in that regard. Yeah, so that's the offensive capabilities, or kind of like the four, very, very in a nutshell. But I think you can see, even just me sitting here and talking about it, you can see a lot of potential. Like, I can see potential already, and we don't know most of the any of the new Pokemon or what they do or any of the stats or anything. So I'm probably going to make a separate video talking about Dynamax and if it's how good it is and how it compares to Z-moves and Megas, because I don't want to make this video too long. But the very last thing that I do want to talk about, that'll probably be tomorrow's video. Or maybe that'll be yesterday's video, because I have time. Anyway, the other thing I want to talk about is Max Guard. Max Guard is the equivalent of Protect. However, instead of let me just make sure that's correct. Yeah, instead of just turning all normal type moves into Protect, which is what the other moves do, like all other max moves, they take the base type of the move if it's an offensive move and then make it into the max version of the move. Max Guard turns all what's it called? Status category moves like Will-O-Wisp, Brain Dance, all that stuff, and turns them into Max Guard. So, for example, a Pokemon, let's say you had Reuniclus on the field and you wanted to Dynamax your Reuniclus because it can't be flinched. So you could set Trick Room guaranteed. You can't do that. If you Dynamax your Reuniclus, your Trick Room will turn into Max Guard. So for that reason, I think it's really interesting because while your Dynamax Pokemon will be able to affect the battle via these max moves, like these offensive moves, they can raise their stats, they can lower stats, they can set terrain, they can set weather. They can't use these traditional team support options: Thunder Wave, Tailwind, Trick Room. So it's just very interesting, and I'm really curious to see how it plays out, because that does seem like a pretty big weakness. The other aspect of that is that you could have a Pokemon with a max move that doesn't normally have Protect, but like, let's say this is kind of a niche case, but like a Pokemon like Liepard, for example, doesn't normally run Protect. It normally runs, like, let's say Fake Tears, Fake Out, Encore, and Foul Play. With Dynamax, if you were in a situation where you really needed to protect your Leopard, you could just Dynamax and Fake Tears, and it would turn into Max Guard. So yeah, I think it's interesting. We're gonna have to see how it plays out. I am a little fearful for it, but in the Dynamax video, I'll talk more about what I'm worried about, why I think it could be good, etc. So yeah, I think that's all I want to say. Thank you guys so much for watching. I am curious, what do you guys think about Dynamax moves? Max moves, sorry. Are they good? Are they weak? We can probably agree they're not weak. How good are they? Are they going to be busted, or are they just going to be balanced? And which of them are you most excited to use, and which do you think are the strongest? So let me know down below, in the comments down below. I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really, really appreciate it. And yeah, stick around for more daily content. We're doing daily content, boys and girls, and whatever you identify as. I don't care. It's on you. But yeah, see you next time. Goodbye.